All day.
Now it's time.
Now I've been.
Teasing you.
We're just. Saying.
Yeah.
Okay, this is our monthly water and sewer meeting, November the 14th, 6:30, so. Everybody's here, that's great. So we have an agenda. With our updates. If we get to that point, we can talk about what we know or from our stop meeting today and. The trail meeting from last week, so we'll take care of the other items first, so. I make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Right.
Oh, it's approved. The approval of the minutes, I erred in not making copies of that, so we'll take care of that at the December meeting. Did anybody get a chance to look at it online? Okay, well, we'll wait for bring it back at this meeting. All right, so. Jump ahead here to, which one do you want to attack first?
An easy one would be the non-sewer water meter.
Okay.
So
What item is that on there?
that would be E10.
And
Five.
five.
Sorry.
Romans, no reason, there's a reason they are.
My bad, sorry. So before the plant does fire up and we start accepting sewer, the people with irrigation, pools, large volumes of water that are not going to be going into the sewer, other towns offer a second meter that is non-sewered water, so you don't pay sewer charges on that volume of water. So it would be a deduct from the first meter. Consider the meters in parallel, or that's something we'd have to work out how we want to come up with that language, so.
So the rationale, of course, is if you do irrigate a lot, that water usage will go towards your sewer rate. So that's why we want to have citizens, or that's why I'd like to have the city provide an irrigation water meter, which is, any idea how much that costs for that size? Or
So it's the same size as the
Yes,
current
yes.
meter, yep, so it's identical, it would have its own reader, it would get read at the same time as the other meters, like I said, it'd be a simple formula, you'd deduct, or you'd have a separate amount of charges for that meter. And water only, no sewer. So. Price of that meter right now, we're charging $450 for. And that is the meter, the brass meter itself, and the hardware, the reader component. So
We're thinking probably another $200 for a plumber to install it, pull a permit, get it installed,
I think there's,
probably requires an inspection.
it would require inspection. So we have to make this sellable, we gotta make it attractive to homeowners. One, for them to save money, but they need to recoup that cost too, that installation cost, that additional meter, so.
So as an alternative, what the city of Rochester does is your your sewer usage, and I believe also like right now from Journey Developing in River Park, your sewer billing is based on your winter usage. December, January, February, something like that.
Yeah, it's,
And then you pay that, they average those 3 months, because nobody's watering their lawn in January or filling their pool. And you pay that amount year round. So when your water use spikes in August, your sewer bill doesn't reflect that.
Sure.
my understanding that the city sends the water meter rating, the water meter readings to Jack every month. That's-
I think they do, but I know also I irrigate.
Yeah.
And my sewer bill does not reflect my irrigation
Oh, it
usage.
doesn't, okay, mine, some reflected somewhat, but not a lot, but. We talked about that in the committee too, is looking at the early months of usage.
Isn't that, if I recall, when Joe did the factoring, that's what they took, is the water usage from those winter months, when they factored our sewer rates. That's what I remember him saying, is we took the winter months, nobody was irrigating, to figure out what our flow would be.
Yeah.
So that formula is pretty standard.
The one caveat to that is if there is anybody in town who moves to Arizona or Florida in the winter time. They don't get any winter water usage, but then they use it in the summer, so. Typically, there will be something in the ordinance that says your minimum bill is for 6 units or whatever the billing unit is.
I guess I like that idea a lot more than, installing a bunch of equipment, it's a lot easier. And it'll be a lot easier sell than saying, hey, you have to cough up $650 or $750 to get a deduct meter installed. And I don't know, would we be responsible for the meter, for the secondary meter?
Yeah,
Then we're picking up maintenance and all that stuff on it too.
the challenge might be from a staffing standpoint, if software will be able to generate that rate. Without being a hand operation, that's because we get more users, but. That's 500 users every month. I would hope there'd be a software, something to go back and trace or be able to. Put steps into the program or something that would tell us that too.
So another thing to consider is instead of going with that kind of that flat sewer rate that. January, February, or December, January, February, that average sewer rate for the entire year. There's the thought of charging people for what they use. Like water, you don't pay a flat fee for water, you pay for every gallon you use. So just like with the water utility, sewer, some cities do handle sewer that way, and whatever you put through that. Water and sewer meter is what you pay for, and it's one way to just better track that flow going to the plant as well. But 2 different ways of looking at it. I know in the February 2021 FAQs, question 21, it said
This is the sheet here. What page is that on?
the FAQ, it's page 9, question 21.
It's hard to use.
I don't know if you guys have this in front of you. Like I said, this is something that was put together back in 21. And it said the proposed wastewater rate structure is $20 per ERU per month plus $5 per 1,000 gallons of use. So that would be the pay-as-you-go rate. So the person who uses less than 1,000 gallons a month water year round, they're gonna be paying the same amount as somebody using 100,000 gallons of water. If we're going off that flat fee schedule.
No, I'm not saying a flat fee, but if your water usage is 5,000 gallons a month average over those 3 winter months. The fee you pay all year round is that 5,000 gallons a month fee. And so if you use 4,500 in July and 7,000 in August, you're still only gonna pay the average of what you did through the winter months. And so, yes, absolutely, Kane, I agree with yours that with this, the metered usage is certainly more accurate. The question is the increase in accuracy offset by the simplicity of only needing 1 meter?
So then, Dylan, would we go and actually average out everyone?
Yeah, every individual homeowner, their account gets averaged for that winter usage. Yes, yeah,
So everyone,
right. Yep, so I got a family of 4, I'm gonna be paying more
sure,
than a retired couple in a small,
sure.
Okay. Question now, if you don't use any water for irrigating.
doesn't matter, 1 meter, 1 bill. Yep,
One
you're-
meter, pay the bill each month, okay, that's it.
unless you got a pool.
Yeah, yeah, and if you only water on once or twice a year, no big deal.
Yeah.
That's so minuscule. If you read your bill at the VFW post, our water usage bill runs $1.50 a month. The rest of the $30 charge is meter, whatever, city charges, this, that, and everything. So if we watered, all right, next spring, when they get around to planting our lawn up there, if we have to, we can water it a little bit. And a little bit. You know, it might be $1 or $2 a month. So that shouldn't affect our sewer usage that much.
Right, and that, I don't know how it came to, so even if we had a secondary meter, if we decided to go that way and put 2 meters on each. That would not probably address homes that just use their outdoor hose bibs and lawn sprinklers for irrigation, right? Because those would not really be connected to that dedicated meter.
Correct.
And so folks in that situation, like the VFW or whatever, you'd end up paying for that
So it's
extra
only-
water usage on both the water and the sewer side.
It's only the people that use large amounts for irrigation or fill swimming pools or something like that.
Yeah, so like in my case then. If we go down the route of using 2 meters, I could cheat the system. Well, no, I don't,
We're not cheating the system.
no, I'd end up, yeah.
Tell us that.
I'm just playing, playing this through my head. My water that I would use through the dedicated meter, I would not get charged a sewer fee for, but my water that I use for my garden connected to my hose, I would pay sewer fee for that, even though they're both outdoor unsewered uses.
I think the point though that Cam was trying to make though is, you said the fee rate was like $5 per 1,000 gallons, right? Someone's got to be able to recoup $650
Right.
paying extra for a meter being installed. And if I only use 5,000 gallons of water in the summer and I pay $5 more, that's a long payout, return on my investment to get $650 back, right? So they're not gonna do it. Well, I wouldn't do it if that, if you weighed out the cost of just paying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, irrigation does use a lot of water. I mean, that is.
So it really depends on how much you water.
Maybe Joe joined the conversation late here. Joe, we're talking about a second meter for irrigation, non-sewered water. So the current rate structure for sewer is gonna be an average per household for those 3 low months, December, January, February. Is that what was proposed? Are we set on that structure is?
Well, that would have to be ordinance.
Right.
Right, so I don't know if we've ever discussed an ordinance proposal for that. But we have talked about that as a practice and.
Yeah, so
Potential.
we essentially have that as a policy adopted through the feasibility report for the project. That's kind of what we talked about is residents that use a lot of water for irrigation purposes, we would use their monthly average rather than their, you know, June, July, August, September numbers. You will see that spike, obviously. So that's one way around it, to make sure that that's more equitable. I joined the conversation late, I got stuck in.
We're
We had
talking
an
about the,
accident, but
an alternative that would be to install a deduct meter for
Yeah.
anybody with irrigation system.
and that would be a great way to do it from the standpoint of it's accurate. The problem is that it costs money. And you know, you run into the issue whether it's through an irrigation system or through a hose or, you know, other things, filling swimming pools, whatever. That water isn't coming back in the wastewater system, so, you know, not everybody's gonna have a meter, you know. If you wanna go down that road and people do it both ways. So,
When you figured our sewer usage, though, you used those winter months to estimate what our flow rates were, if I remember you correctly. That's how that project went planned. That seems like the easiest way, minus the technical of actually averaging it. Right, I don't know the logistics of that. The software readings are automatic, right?
Right, you'd have to take those 3 readings per account, average them and then set that
For the next year.
for that next year. There's 100 different ways to do it. You could even kind of do a blocked rate in there, you know, people less than 5,000 or more than 5 in between. There's ways to do this. Like I said, I'm getting a lot of questions and a lot of interest in that second meter when people are using 100,000 gallons a month. And if they're expected to pay sewer on that 100,000 gallons.
Which is
do we
generally,
really have users that are using 100,000 gallons of water? a
Yes.
month?
Yes, consistently.
They do.
And so what I'm saying to this board, to everyone is the water system works, you pay for what you use. Like going to the grocery store, you want a gallon of milk, you pay for it. If you want 2, you pay for it. It's a commodity, right? The water,
Well, those people are still paying for the water though. So if they do use 100,000, they're still getting paid for the water.
Absolutely.
right, but
Just that
now,
they don't have to pay it on the back end, right? They
Right.
shouldn't have to.
Well, anybody that uses that much, it may be worthwhile to install a second meter for that purpose, but, you know, for you and me, irrigating, if I water a lawn 6 times a year, I figure if God wants it to grow, he'll water it. And then I don't worry about watering it too much. So, it would not pay for me to have a separate meter by what you're talking about right now. I mean, I couldn't save that in 50 years, and I won't live long enough to recoup that.
That could work for like car wash places, because like we don't have any car wash places.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, what about all that water? Commercial. Commercial rates.
that'd be a different ERU based on the building, the facility usage, right?
Yeah, commercial, that's all wastewater too, so.
I know, but that's what I'm saying, they'd have to cover all that.
Anything that goes through the building, such as a car wash, has to go through the sewer system. So it doesn't make any difference. If it comes,
Yeah, right.
you know, I mean, that wouldn't affect it. The only thing that makes a big difference is anybody that does a lot of outside irrigating.
We don't have a commercial rate for wastewater. We do on the water side, but not on the wastewater side.
So it's something we'll wanna look at. 'cause-
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I look at places like that where you have chances for oil and other things to end up into the water as your underbody flushing and stuff. I would want to make sure the city's protected or covered.
Well, and in some users, you'll get a heavier waste stream than domestic wastewater, you know.
Well, you're right, we don't have anything in our sewer that I can see in their sewer utility code about payment promises, so. Or payment ways of determining the sewer rate, so that's something we probably should continue to discuss and with an ordinance update sometime in the future, there very soon, so.
Yeah, I think we addressed it through the policy memo that we adopted as part of, the council adopted as in conjunction with the feasibility report. It was an appendix to the feasibility report of the project.
So technically, we just need to get it into an ordinance, or is it still worth?
Well,
It require a public hearing as well, and so forth, so.
yeah, there's different ways to do stuff like that, I guess.
Well,
Well, and I would say then for Kane, you know, if you're getting questions about this from people, you know, you can refer them to that the council is so far operating under that mode that you'll be at your winter usage, which does not include irrigation or those other ancillary uses will be your basis of your bill year round.
I think one of the frequently asked questions document about the project addressed that question.
Yes.
If I remember right.
Yep.
Been a while, but I'm pretty sure.
Question 21.
Yes,
I've got it here.
Okay.
So I just wanna make sure that schedule or that policy, whatever form that takes for wastewater, if we had that and could give that to people, this is an idea, this is where you could be, or it does kind of seem one neighbor sewer bill is through the roof, the next door neighbors is not. So I just wanna make sure we can pay for this plant too. I don't want a year go by and say, man, we missed out on a lot of fees. You know, we treated all this additional water. Or,
We're still doing that.
Well, we won't be treating, you wouldn't be treating the water. I mean, it's,
No, but if you know, it is less accurate. So if we miss out on a bunch, and cities do that also. They compare their, you know, how much money are they billing out? How many gallons are they billing out on the water side versus what they're billing out on the sewer side? And you compare the two. And if they're way off, that means you got something out of whack somewhere and you need to find it, right? And so, you know, that indicates a lot of infiltration or something else going on in the system, which I would say at that point, if we do see that trend, then we can revisit this issue. I would be willing to.
There's nothing in your state reports that would irrigation be, is that a line item of identifying non-house use?
yeah, they asked that question, the Department of Natural Resources asked that question.
So it's,
Is there,
you sell it commercially, you know, with water meters to people that, for the construction people that use that,
yep,
document that,
so
so.
there's metered residential, metered commercial, metered non-household, there's all sorts of ways to identify water. And of course, irrigation, swimming pools, going into a floor drain, daylighting, those are all different ways to identify water, so.
So as a follow-up item, we'll check with staff to see what our software that we use, the Badger Surf.
Yep.
See if that software can pull out those figures without being a manual process for staff.
Yeah.
There's some dollars associated with that too, so.
Yeah, I think that'll be important too.
well, there's a way to automate that through a spreadsheet and some simple,
You would think so, but yeah.
I mean, I could
There's,
set that up if you need.
If you have a pool and it takes 3,000 gallons to fill it once a year. So you can say, okay, we're gonna say that you fill your pool one time. Now, if you top it off a little bit, 100 gallons here and there, that's nickels and dimes on your water bill. And I don't think it's gonna be a heck of a lot more on a sewer bill. So that's not a budget breaking issue, is it?
that's.
The
what-
3,000 was. Now that, we should probably. You know, if they say they wanna fill their pool one time. You know, okay, we should have some way of adjusting for that. But if the construction company in town here wants to fill their truck for watering roads or whatever, Kane gives them a meter, that water is not, that'll never be charged to the sewer plant.
Correct.
That water usage goes to Mother Nature or whatever.
Okay, well, we'll keep it on our agenda. Do some checking out and go.
We've got time,
Yeah, that's the point, we need to make sure we take care of the next 2-3 months too.
absolutely.
Joe, would you like to, we'll jump back to your updates.
Do you have that the discussion of the cross connection program, you wanna address that now? I don't care. We're talking about it. So.
Yeah, we sure could, so. You guys wanna talk about that right now, then I can leave. I can go home and cry, part of the, Safe Drinking Act, states that water purveyors need to. Enforce safe drinking water. Regulations, and so we need to set a minimum protection program for prevention of health hazards such as cross connection. So Owatonna has one and RPU has one, and these two are like the number 1 and 2 in the state of Minnesota. If you talk to any town who does anything with cross connection and backflow, Rochester stands out because they are the only city in Minnesota for commercial buildings that require a containment style backflow device. So whatever goes into that building stays in the building. If there was a backflow or a back pressure, back siphonage issue out in the water system, water inside, say, the McDonald's would stay in the McDonald's. It could not backflow out into the street to other users. So that's one thing special about RPU, and that's just on commercial buildings, not houses. So residentially speaking, if you have an irrigation system, that should have a backflow device on it. And that falls under the plumbing code. It needs to be tested and needs to be inspected and possibly rebuilt if it is a rebuildable type. So I'm asking this board, first conversation, first meeting, to consider developing a cross connection program that would at minimum cover the non-residential buildings. So the gas stations, the restaurants, the commercial buildings, to start there, the high risk areas, and then work into the lower risk areas, the residential, the irrigation systems. And some people are already compliant. Some of the residential homeowners who have irrigation have their backflow device tested every year. When they send us the reports, we have that. But developing something that's kind of got a clear one spot for all that language instead of several places in the city code and ordinances, I think would be beneficial. It just seems like the city code has some sort of language, but not a standalone program. So that's what I'm considering. It's easy now, we only have 395 users now. So now's the time to start building this. And if the city does, if we allow, it can start with the high hazards and we can slowly segment into other areas. But for the most part, if you're just a homeowner who doesn't have irrigation or doesn't have a high hazard connection, this doesn't affect you.
The question, Kate.
Yeah.
You said so for code right now. So the new commercial places going in by the gas station, right? Wouldn't they, if they put anything in, have to install then a backflow device now, if that's state code, plumbing code?
It's not, our RPU does that on all commercial buildings.
So that's a city-specific code, not a state plumbing code.
Correct.
So,
Yep,
and even residential places, if you have a sprinkler man or certified contractor come, they don't put that on as standard. Cause it's not required.
it
By
is,
any-
Like it's required.
it is required.
So anybody who has unless you install it yourself, if you had a professional company come and install the irrigation system, they would already have that on there. Okay. That's all I was just trying to
We
understand.
have had, I'm aware of one irrigation system that our building inspector saw several years ago that didn't have a backflow. And they brought it to their attention and to the installer that did it too, so it's irrigation people that do in Rochester, they're well aware of it and they just send the reports in, I believe, to the city, the ones that do file a
You just
protest.
want to make it straight for commercial, because that's not required.
No, I'm just saying that's a, for instance, RPU does it that way, and I think that is a good way. No matter what's going on in the building, you could have a closed heating loop, closed cooling loop, you could have chemical mixtures, you could have 100 things going on inside of a building that you don't want in your water supply. So if there was a water main break out in the street, and for some reason the hose was stuck in the can of paint or whatever, a chemical, if it didn't have a backflow device on that point of use, it would get drawn back into the system and now affect the entire system. So I'm just saying high hazard areas for now, and this thing can grow into cover more areas, more cross connections.
So the comment you made earlier about above ground irrigation doesn't require, but the one that are in ground irrigation systems, the concern there is if there's contamination gets into your in-ground system and that backflows into the house without a backflow, is the reason we want that, so chemicals, duck food, whatever, you know, so.
Mhm.
Well, there is a need for it, it's just that it prevents the city from very costly fixes or to the homeowner as well as the city too.
It's all based around health, safety, safe drinking water. And that's the premise of it, the Safe Drinking Water Act, 1974, so.
Yeah, so on commercial properties in Rochester, I work on the opposite end of this, so I get a letter from RPU every October, I think. It says, hey, your backflow preventers are due for inspection, and then I get a phone call from the plumber, because they're all on board too, because it's an easy way for them to, put in FaceTime and, they get paid to do it. And it's really pretty painless. I've got 5 or 6 of them on my site that I have to have inspected. And like I said, it's pretty painless. It does.
Again, about $400 to do the test though.
I don't know, honestly, I haven't looked at the invoice.
I can't remember the invoices either. We had to do it on our commercial building.
The one inconvenience for sure is depending on the property, you have to shut the water off to do it for the duration of the test, and then, if they have to repair it, they have to come back a different day. And so, coordinating the timing of the test can be, you gotta shut the water off. So you gotta do it either before business hours or after, or have, a bypass around it so that you can test it while still maintaining water service. And so that, now if you got a bypass, you got a whole other thing you got to address, right? And so, it's generally pretty painless, but
Okay. Good discussion, I think it's very timely, so.
Yeah.
We could do something in the winter and spring months, that seemed to be better, so. Any other comments?
Previously, in a different life. When I worked for the city of Rochester, the only time we were involved with backflow preventers is when fire protection systems had what they call an antifreeze loop on them. The rest of the time, the water oh, it's stagnant and stinks and don't taste good. It wasn't a health issue, but when they had antifreeze loop, that was. But
And so I actually just had to talk with RPU on a fire protection system. They require a check valve, which is typically also something that the fire department requires, so they can hook their pumper truck up and not push
Well-
water back into the system, but
there
a
always,
backflow preventers.
there always has to be a check valve on the sprinkler system, period.
Right, but that is not
But
necessarily covered under the backflow prevention program.
late, if you have an antifreeze loop, you have to an RPZ
Yeah,
backflow preventer. Also, in addition to the check valve that's on there.
yeah, because we have wet systems, water fill, that are just direct connected with a check valve.
With a check valve.
But we have dry systems that
That they have an RPZ.
not even required to have an RPZ. It has one, but we talked to RPU and they said they don't require it. So fire protection requires special consideration, I think is the short answer there.
Yeah.
Well, that is, everybody needs to have a code. We don't have anything.
And I'm just saying, it'd be nice to get rid of any of the ordinances and languages you have and have a one-stop shop that could have fire protection, commercial buildings.
Yeah. Residential irrigation, I'd be interested to know what that would say.
And then what devices, list out the devices, cause plumbing code did change here within so many years, and now there's multiple devices that are testable and rebuildable, and anyway.
With any of those kind of programs, administration of the program becomes an issue. One option that I know the city of Rochester is not, I don't know if it's RPU directly, but I know other, like the fire department does in sprinkler systems, is there are whole businesses that pop up around compliance. And basically, every time a plumber submits a compliance report to the city, they have to pay a $10 fee. And that $10 fee goes directly to the compliance company. And the city just gets the report. And so I don't know what kind of options are available for a small town like Orinoco. But that is an option where you basically pass the cost of administering the program onto the contractor, who then passes that cost on to the user. And really then the city just has to file paperwork. You don't actually have to follow up on it. I don't really like that model, but I think it works well where resources are scarce. You know, where it takes less than a full-time employee to do that work, then it doesn't make sense to bring it in-house.
Okay. Right, good conversation. Joe?
Wastewater project. Start with wastewater treatment plant. There is a construction status update, the same update we always put together. I did pass them around if people want to kind of peruse them. Good to kind of keep up on what's going on there, a lot of details. But construction continues out there. At this point, it's almost all electrical work. Staub has mobilized off the site, really hasn't had people there for about a month. And again, as you recall, the MCC stuff came in last month, and so that's all getting wired. The temporary panels are getting wired. And all of that equipment is going in. So at this point, the wastewater treatment plant has all the equipment necessary to initiate operation, and that is moving forward. So that is good.
Lift station control panels.
Lift station control panels continue to be a problem. The update today, we had a construction coordination meeting, was that they are supposed to be here at the end of January. The update as of about 4 o'clock is we're supposed to get lift station 1 by the end of this year. And then the other ones are supposed to trickle in between January and March. So they are behind schedule. And really kind of preclude our startup period. What we have been talking about with the contractor is a clean water startup, so that we can go through commissioning and training in December. And then they'll go into a maintenance mode with the treatment facility until probably March, when the weather really starts to turn and warm up, and then we can seed the plant. And at that point, lift stations should be operational, and we can start to tie the subdivisions and Orinoco Estates over, and then start wastewater treatment probably late March. And so that's good from the perspective of we don't have to start treating wastewater with the real cold temps. The biological process is difficult when it's really cold and you're starting to, you're really kind of trying to grow bacteria and initiate the process. So that will help from that perspective, although March certainly isn't warm. It's better, it's improving quickly rather than on the downhill side of it. So we think that's a reasonable approach. It gives the contractor a little bit more time to get through that commissioning and start up those two. Unfortunate about the lift station control panels. That's automatic systems that they're coming from.
I've supported those guys for a month.
Well, you laugh, but we're not unique in this.
Yeah, they were a year late for us.
Yeah. Control panels and different components within those panels, even replacing components are difficult to get. And it takes time. So even in spite of the fact that we've been waiting a long time, we're apparently gonna end up waiting a little longer. On the plus side, we're not paying an operator through the winter. So we did just find this information out today at the construction coordination meeting. So I'll convey that information to the council, but at this point, I think the die is kind of cast. There's not gonna be a startup because we don't have all the components to start up, and that's essentially the lift station components. The lift station control panel components, everything else is here, pumps are here, structures are there. Treatment facility could be operational, it's really that. The other thing that we talked about at the treatment facility is there is a lot of wiring work, a lot of electrical work to get done between now and then. The contractor says they can get it done. My folks on site are a little bit more skeptical. They're gonna have to bring in some more horsepower to make that happen. That takes a little bit of pressure off them from that perspective too.
Is there anything that the electrical contractor would prevent from starting the commissioning in November?
Yeah, commissioning is really scheduled. The contractor does have a schedule for commissioning different components of the facility, starting the 28th of November, something like that. But really kicks off the first or second week of December. Things get a little bit more in depth. I think the first wave is pretty modest stuff. So they've got that schedule and they're scheduling vendors to be in, and the electrician has that schedule as well. So they're prioritizing to make sure things are operational by those times. So hopefully that continues to all move forward and keep that schedule. So
If that slips, is that an issue? So I'm assuming when you say that, you're talking about the clean water startup, right? All that has to be wired for that.
yes,
And if it's not, then.
and it delays that. But we do have some time. People don't necessarily like to work on things like that in January and February, but if you get reasonable days, it can be done. We don't have the bacteria issue to kind of deal with. It's just making sure that everything functions and the set points are being hit and different tests can be run and things can be commissioned that way, so.
The plant effluent lift station only discharges to the river though, right?
Mhm.
And so if we pump anything to the river, we're gonna be subject to permit requirements, which are gonna include testing and monitoring and effluent things. So we'll just need to be very careful that even though it's clean water, if we pump it out the discharge,
Right.
the state is gonna wanna know that.
MPCA was on site. And did their walkthrough, about 2 weeks ago. And that went well. Corey Howard was out and, seemed like he was pleased with what he saw. Punch list inspections are gonna start Thursday. The architect and the mechanical engineer are gonna be down. It's too early to do the electrical walkthroughs, but they're gonna at least generate punch lists for buildings and mechanical systems and those types of things that essentially are complete. We have already made somewhat of a punch list. There's a dozen things to do out there, small items the contractor knows about, but we'll start to formalize that and move that forward. So those activities have been initiated and they'll kick off on Thursday when the architect and the mechanical engineer are here.
So today there's the gentleman that's gonna be operating the plant from People Service.
Yeah.
Was here.
Yeah.
He sat in our staff meeting and Jeff took him out to the plant for the first exposure. Did Jeff share any comments with you or how the visit went or
So
anything?
do we have an agreement with People Service?
We are under contract. We have an executed agreement with them. Yep. So the council did approve that. And we worked through that process. It got signed and it's executed. So at this point, they're kind of wanting to know what our schedule is. So now that I think I know, I'll probably report that to them. Because they need to have an idea of when they have to have somebody started. They don't want to hire somebody and then have them sit. which I-
So the person that you meet, is that the person they hired for us?
No, he is the operator in West Concord.
Okay.
And so his name is Dan and he is an experienced operator. He is, to my knowledge, I don't think he's a Class A operator. But according to Jeff, I wasn't out there right away. I think he was impressed with our facility. I thought he thought it was gonna be something much smaller and different. So he may well be interested. I think he lives in Dodge Center. So I think we made a good impression. Well, that's good. The O&M manual for the project was completed and submitted to the city, as well as the checklist that we have to submit to the MPCA 60 days before we initiate operations. So I just wanted to have that in place in case we wanted to start in December. We would have met that submission timeline. So that's in place. I assume you downloaded that. The O&M manual.
I don't believe I got that, Joe.
Okay. I think I sent it to you and I sent it to you and I sent it to Corey and I sent it to Renee. But I can resend it.
Please do. I know you talked about it here last time we spoke.
What was it again, Joe?
It's an operation and maintenance manual for the wastewater treatment facility as well as the lift stations. It's
It's really 1,000+ pages or something.
Yeah.
You told me, but I don't think I got it either.
yeah, it came on my FTP site by email. So you'd have to go onto the FTP site and download all the files because there's 1,000 pages there.
Yeah, I think. That was a couple months ago. Yeah, wasn't recent, okay. I'm pretty sure.
I'll resend it. It's not a big deal. Switch gear, no update. Like we said, the MCC stuff is here and being installed. Lift station control panels are end of the month through March. I talked about the commissioning and clean water startup, wastewater startup. Last week, we didn't know that, but at this point, because the lift station control panels aren't gonna be here, it is what it is. Unfortunately, we will target that March 24 startup, depending on weather conditions and contractor scheduling. Bob has a change order request for some heat trace. We did talk about that today a little bit. We have heat trace for some of the chemical lines to make sure that there's not freezing issues. The heat trace was in the plans, but the electrical services for the heat trace wasn't in the electrical plan. And so the electrical contractor did not bid it. And so they have asked for a change order item on that. So I think that's gonna be $10,000 to $15,000. So we will work through that with them and present something when we get something. We did just have a construction coordination meeting today. And the next one is probably gonna be in mid-December. We may even have that on site. We'll kind of schedule that around the trainings and the commissioning out there. Pick a good day when people are gonna be around. That makes sense. Anything on the treatment facility that you guys want to talk about? And of course, everybody's welcome if you've got time. You were out within the last, you were out last month.
I think so, yeah.
If people have time and want to come out, you're welcome to come out. Let Jeff know, because everything is locked up at this point. You won't be able to get in without a key.
Just a quick question, because we didn't meet our deadlines, are there any penalties or things that anybody's gonna be held accountable for?
Well,
Or is it because it's supply chain, act of God, whatever?
that's the argument the contractors made. The contractor, in my opinion, has put in the effort to get everything done that they can. It's really not getting certain materials at the right times or when they would have normally thought to been here. So we did some compromising in terms of they're installing some of the temporary facilities basically at their cost to get things up and running, if you remember with the last change order. So we did a little horse trading with that in good faith and they reciprocated that. So we had thought we would be up and running by December, and that's kind of where we left it. The final decision as to what to do with that, essentially both contracts, because the lift stations are under Fitzgerald's contract, but they were supplied as part of the wastewater project. So we had all the same vendors and products. Neither one of them really met the completion date. They're both going to point to supply chain issues in terms of that. And there's some validity to that. And I think you could push back on that too if you wanted to. It really depends on the stances the city wants to take. Right now, given the cooperation of the contractors and what they've done to date, my leading thought is probably not to push on that. I don't know that it's fair, but that's just my opinion.
Are there any state or county anything that they're gonna come back onto us for at all? We've talked with those folks, they're all aware of.
Well, county's not a county's not a player, the state obviously is a player, and yeah, Corey's been up to speed on.
Well, I get, when I say the county, mostly because they're the ones that are enforcing like the septic tank ordinances, right, for the folks
They
in
are.
town. Yeah, and so,
I don't think that's an issue.
okay.
I think that they've, we essentially have that moratorium in place and they're continuing to enforce that just like they have for the last 6 years.
And any active construction projects, you know, for example, that bus garage. Or anything else that's going on around town gonna be impacted by the delay?
No. The bus garage will go to the community waste treatment system. That exists now for that short duration until March, assuming that they're even open and operational by then. My guess is they probably won't be. The restaurant's the bigger user. And they're looking for. To start out probably next fall.
Yeah.
So I don't think,
August time frame is what I've heard, so.
That's the one, right?
I guess.
Somewhere.
Yeah, Shell.
Oh, that one,
Gas
got it, yeah.
station.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering what that was.
no, yeah, I'll buy the
Okay,
gas and go there,
Yeah.
right kind of on the point
Yeah.
of that development. There's
Yeah.
a pretty nice restaurant that's gonna go in there. I. Looks like a very nice restaurant,
Okay.
so.
So we don't anticipate any negative consequences from our perspective from the delay until March.
I think from the standpoint of. We would like to serve people sooner rather than later. I think everybody would. And there isn't revenue coming in from that service, but on the opposite side of that, there's not. There's not operations cost to the tune of almost $19,000 a month. That we have to pay out, and if our, you know, if we start that facility up and start paying operation maintenance costs. Now struggle through the winter with very low flows. And that's
And Staub and Fitzgerald are gonna bear the cost of winterizing everything. We talked about that,
we
right?
talked about that today.
And I'm assuming we're gonna heat these buildings for the
Yeah.
winter and that cost will fall on us.
We haven't talked about that.
Did we technically take ownership of those? And
We didn't.
so then it's not our responsibility.
So that, you know, those are
So
some
those are all sets. So I guess,
things we're gonna have to kind of work through and negotiate, but
so they're working with us.
I think that they're a good partner. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
agree, I think.
You guys have a different perspective, but I think they're one of the better contractors I've ever worked with.
So the gentleman from Stop, he indicated they would pull the pumps from the lift stations during the winter. They didn't want to lubricate them, whatever it takes to make sure they stay in good shape. Made the comment about heating the buildings and it was kind of we'll keep some heat on them, you know, above freezing or anything like that, so. I mean, there's lights on there now that they're paying for, so.
That's the big thing, is all those things have to be covered.
Yeah, and they do add up, no doubt. So, you know, as we kind of have a course here, we've just kind of figured this out over the day, frankly. We'll have to start working on those finer points, but
Yeah.
I do think they're a good partner and they're reasonable people. So, and
Orinoco Estates is also aware of the issues.
they are now, they don't know what you guys know tonight, but again, we just found that out, but I will be forwarding that information to them. Soon. But they were, you know, they understand, you know, I kind of email with Ron Cox there probably monthly. Anything else on wastewater? Treatment facility, the collection conveyance system. There's a resident update number 33 out there. Fitzgerald is continuing to work. They've got a couple crews active. One crew, or they've got a couple different crews installing sewer services and doing some miscellaneous work. And then they've got a couple of restoration crews working, doing topsoil and gravel placement, a little bit of work on lift station driveways, those types of things. Basically at this point, all the pipe is in the ground with the exception of a few services. I think we have 2 water services under Fifth Street Northwest that they were unable to directional drill underneath the road, to hit some rock. So we'll either have to directional drill or we'll have to either open cut those next year. Or we'll have to, I have asked Ellingson for a price to directional drill those with a rock bit. So there's some portion of that crossing that's in rock, some portion of it's just sand. So we'll get that cost and we'll do a little analysis and figure out what the best option is there. But there's just 2 water services left. And then the rest of the services they're working on are sewer services, and they're the low pressure sewer services to the grinder station. All the gravity sewer pipe is in. All the bigger force mains are in. All the street reconstruction, alley reconstruction is done. The paving's done. Bituminous plants are closed, by the way. There is a wear course to go back on this, on the second half of all of the streets that were constructed this year, with a few little exceptions. So you'll notice a few drop-offs or areas that it's a little uneven. And that's just a function of there's another 1.5 inches of pavement to go on next year. It did get laid on the contractor. They didn't get that done, but I don't feel bad about that. I think letting things sit through the winter, and if there is any settlement, we can take that out through the wear course paving. I think that's a good thing for both ends. Ellingson's here. They're installing a few remaining force main services to the grinder stations that they can directional drill, and they've got a couple tanks that they want to install, but I think they're going to be suspending their work here pretty quick. And they'll be back in March to start things up, or whenever the weather is reasonable. So that kind of continues to happen. We have a pay request for Fitzgerald to the tune of about $703,000, as you see on the agenda. Now to go to the council next month. I should have mentioned Stops pay request is about $84,000. So obviously that indicates most of their work is done. They're doing a lot of electrical work, and a lot of the material on hand payments are being deducted from the labor payments. And so that's why it's a fairly modest number at this point. And they're giving full turkey. We did have a little bit of correspondence go out to some property owners on the low pressure system. I do have copies of that information if you guys want to see that, but trying to communicate with property owners about the need to provide access and cooperate with the process. If you want to pass them around, you're welcome to do that. But we had positive interaction with both property owners. And I think that both property owners will be moving forward with. In fact, one's already under construction, and the other item, gentleman called me today and indicated that well, he essentially apologized for being difficult to deal with, and they are on board with the improvements and will do their best to take a more positive approach to the project. Any questions on the collection? Conveyance improvements, you guys,
I saw that they had opened up. Part of what I think was directionally drilled along Kurt Jenkins' property. Last week. You know what that was about?
so there's Kurt's served with a grinder station.
Okay.
Cause he's a walkout back there and they're probably putting in the tank in the force main of the
Okay.
grinder station.
Okay.
Um,
That would connect to the Garden Park discharge.
actually it ties into the 6-inch force main that, discharges into the, gravity sewer on Third Street.
Yeah, which is the discharge from the Garden Park lift
Yeah.
station, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, lift station too.
okay.
So I'm sure that's what they're doing. I haven't been there myself, but I'm sure that's it.
Sure, okay.
And the contractor has, we've had some great weather, in terms of allowing them to get in and do boulevard grading and shaping. Obviously downtown, things aren't finished graded. There's another 1.5 inches of pavement to go on next year and they'll have to bring in more topsoil and finish that shouldering. And they obviously have some shouldering to do over on West Center Street and First Street Northwest and a little bit more ditch grading to do there. But I think that that work will continue and if the weather stays reasonable, I imagine they'll work through Thanksgiving and into December.
If Fitzgerald work on the transfer of edges on East Center Street with there was a combination, I think I shared with you earlier this week. And
Oh.
Fitzgerald's bringing out 5 tons of
For the bituminous, yeah.
bituminous, yeah.
So they did do that, do probably, I don't know, 6 spots. Downtown, there was some on East Center and West Center Street, right by the VFW was one spot. And then a number of driveways and different spots, I think 7th Street, for example. Northwest had a spot, but yeah, they basically made a 18-inch ramp. Where there was a butt joint, against, wear course paving. So they'll come in next year, they'll mill that out, and then when they place the wear course, it'll,
The gentleman does the snow plowing brought it to our attention. He was just concerned about making sure those transitions were ramped out and they had plans to do that. So they took care of that this week, so.
yeah, and they're not strangers to doing those types of ramps. It happens on pretty much every reconstruct every year. So they will have to be careful, when they plow along the new curb that was constructed along East Center Street. They'll probably stay a little bit away from the curb there, because the curb's down 1.5 inches.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of try to keep the plows away from that, but again, that's not,
There's a small curb on First Avenue Northwest and above Paul Pendergrass's house too, on that inside curve.
right,
We'll have to watch.
right. So, yeah, that stuff is all done and they literally closed the plants, for bituminous last Friday. So that was the last day to get mixed. But it is done. Anything else that anybody,
So, this that you passed around, Joe, the person making the stink is not the property owner?
he's not. But he was very gracious in a call today. He sent me a call, a text and an email. After, I think he maybe rents the place from his mother or mother-in-law and she's the property owner.
Okay.
So anyway, I think that I'm thrilled that that situation seemingly has been worked out because it was difficult.
Yeah, seems like it.
For little or no reason. But so that's positive. Anything else on that piece of it?
So as we touch base on the people's service. Is it, when the gentleman is here during, or whoever's here during the startup, and the commission is an hourly basis? Is that what
I
we're
think you're
agreeing to?
paying, city's paying him $70 an hour to participate. You know, so you probably get billed for his attendance at the meeting and trying to get up to speed. And through the training and commissioning process, you'll pay him $70 an hour, and that does add up. I mean, there'll be weeks that he's here more than not, I think. And that's what we really want. They should be here during that training. I think it's to everybody's benefit.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at, and then I think if it's all right with you, I'll communicate to the people service that, you know, based on what we know from the contractor, will likely be starting up. And then they can plan accordingly with their staffing. Anything else on people's?
I think so. All right. Joe and I are giving a presentation to the MPCA at their annual collection and wastewater conference, November 29th. And what is that again?
Brooklyn Park, it used to be.
Yeah, it's usually in Brooklyn Park at that.
At Brooklyn Park, yeah.
Marriott. Yeah.
Do you go to that?
I haven't been for a while. It was in March.
It'll be a really good presentation at 1 o'clock on Thursday.
So, you wanna give it?
Standing room only.
I think I'm getting a haircut that day.
It's that exciting, huh?
So we've got a little bit of work to do to put that together. We'll get there.
That'll be here before we go.
Yes.
Okay, next meeting is December 12th. And we'll get an update on how the commissioning and startup went. Process, so. So this mid-March. Whatever your late March operation deadline, how? Now that seems that's pretty firm. It appear to be pretty firm based on lift station control panels. If you come in early, we're still won't start up in the middle of January, February, I don't believe, so.
I don't think that's in anybody's best interest to start up a plant at that point. Just too cold and too difficult and too much risk.
You'll have to put all the lift station components in and can do the commissioning and startup on those in that kind of weather and that.
That's true, yeah.
Even in March, I mean, well, March can be
Cold or not cold.
okay or it can be horrible, you know? So I think we're gonna have to play that a little, you know, just use some common sense too. Yeah, and start up as soon as we can reasonably start up. I know Fitzgerald's gonna be anxious to get the connections made and get things running, and stop too. But people wanna, you know, they make money by doing work and not sitting on jobs, so that makes sense.
Yeah, wastewater treatment is also highly dependent on water temperature also, which goes down until about that March timeframe when it starts to warm back up. And so that'll impact startup too.
With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Make most of it,
Or did you do it? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right.
Joe, this other property owner, the less colorful, that also came to
Yes.
the resolution.
Yeah, that's in process.
Just spent a month with automatic system doing a 10 million. For de-icing.
They get their fingers in lots of different
Yeah.
things, huh?
That's a really good lawyer instruction.
Yeah, they recover, recycle it.
Yeah.
So from all the de-ice pads, back 10 million gallons. Saying it just